What is one of the most important elements of learning? I'd argue that it's language. And here's why. Yesterday, I spent about 7 hours learning how to do one very simple thing in music production: to play both legato and staccato in one track. In my head, this sounds super simple. But to do this, you would need to create articulation sets for sampled instruments with extended techniques in a single track using a multi-rack setup with either key switching method, which utilizes the bottom register of the keyboard, or the UACC-KS system using channels and velocity values. And unless you're already familiar with the language and terminology of music production, that probably all sounded like gibberish to you. And it did to me as well before yesterday, but thanks to the 7-hour struggle that I did, I managed to figure out what everything meant, but the extremely long and tedious way. In hindsight, had I simply known the concepts of articulation sets alone, that would have been enough to look up a YouTube video to directly take me to what I wanted to know. But I had to struggle to find it because I didn't know the right terms to look up. So the trick to saving hours of struggling to even know the right words to use to look things up is to spend that time establishing a foundation with the language of the skill that you're learning. For me, that's music production. And I think this applies to many skills you can learn out there: calisthenics, gymnastics, learning an instrument, video editing, and so on. I'm choosing those things because those are the things that I personally know myself, and they definitely have their own set of terminology. Being able to understand that language and terminology of those skills will help make things far easier to research and seek help for. I also think this is why having an actual teacher that you can ask questions to is extremely helpful, because they're essentially a walking skill dictionary. They've gone through the struggle of learning everything already, so to them, the language is now second nature. This is probably the absolute fastest way to learn because you won't need to look things up or brush up on the terminology, since they'll teach you what you need to know when it becomes relevant. But oftentimes teachers aren't exactly accessible, so studying the terminology can be a very useful thing to start out with to establish a foundation of understanding how you want to look things up if you get stuck. So an actionable step would be to type into YouTube the name of the skill and then just terminology right after. And some videos will pop up. The issue with this is that you may not know what knowledge is necessary for you specifically and what's sort of just noise. So you might forget it, but at least you'll have a rough understanding of the basic terminology. Basically, we're refining our skills to be able to do a YouTube search better when the time comes, when you inevitably have that question you need answered to break through a problem you're facing. Also, I'm mentioning YouTube a lot because I believe it's the most effective way to learn. I've tried Googling the same issues, and I find that text is just far harder to digest. The visual element of a video is far superior. Trying to learn purely with text is like trying to learn a backflip with a book with no pictures. I can glean way more information from someone doing a backflip in front of me in 2 seconds compared to 5 minutes of reading a book about it. And those are just some tips to learn faster. I'm hoping by following this tip myself, I won't need to spend that many hours to figure out something so simple again. To be fair, a lot of those hours were sunk into actually doing the setup, and Logic Pro's method of creating articulation sets is pretty archaic and slow. Anyways, thanks for watching. Best of luck with your learning.